Hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Filev, and I'm founder and CEO of a company called Wrike. Today, we're going to talk about how to make remote work productive and more enjoyable. In this conversation, I'll rely on my own experience and on some anecdotes that I've learned from the customers. And we'll talk about not just what is good for you to do, but also what you should avoid at all costs. Because I've seen some companies make what I would call grave mistakes of remote collaboration, and I wanted to not only give you a good blueprint on what works, but also kind of warn you against some things that I think are detrimental. So maybe we'll start just there. Recently, there's been some media coverage talking about the rise in popularity on surveillance tools. Right, and what starts as potentially good intent, employers, managers, they need to keep their businesses afloat, and to do that, they want to make sure that employees are productive and working well. And without knowing better, first thing that comes to somebody's mind is like, okay, I'm gonna just check out what my team is doing, because I want to make sure they're not just spending their time at social networks and e-commerce website and Hulu and Netflix. I just want to make sure they're doing the right thing. So again, we can argue whether it's a good or bad intent, but what follows after is definitely not so good, right? So they consider what's called employee surveillance and monitoring software, which again, with that intent, the results of that are catastrophic, because it hurts something that, in my opinion, is essential for productive work, whether it's in-person work, and especially important in remote work, which is trust, right? So when you instrument and surveillance software, it's not just making you unproductive, right? Because you gotta check what other people are doing and basically wasting your time, right? But in order for any team to operate at its highest performance level, the trust fabric is critical. That's why, for example, in your executive team, or pretty much in any part of your organization, I'm sure you've been thinking about team building and things like that. You don't do them for nothing, right? Of course, they're fun, but the reason you do that is that it helps the team build the trust, and that trust becomes very important fabric and currency in helping those productive relationships with each other and kind of getting something done. And most of the work we're doing today requires more than just one individual, right? It requires the team to pull together and in one direction. So surveillance definitely hurts that. And through that, actually reduces productivity. So if that's not an option, or if that's I would say if that's a terrible option, what would be a good alternative, right? And the way I would recommend you to think is just kind of go one level up or two levels up. So the reason why people make this terrible decision of implementing surveillance software is just because they want to get visibility, right? Which is not a bad intent in itself. As we working together, as we used to work in the same office, it's actually easier, right, to get visibility. What are we doing? How is the progress? If needed, I can step up and help you. If you're moving away from the direction we're heading, right, we can align, and then you don't have to redo that work. So getting visibility into each other's work is, while it sounds very similar, it's actually very, very different, and that is important for productivity. So that's one. And the second is, again, the word productivity itself hints us in the right direction. Productivity is about producing something, right? And that is about outcomes. So the more you can switch the conversation from activity to the outcomes, the easier it is to build both that fabric of trust, transparency, alignment, and at the same time be very, very, very productive, right? So that's why for a lot of managers, when they go through MBA, they spend some time learning about how to set the right goals for the team. And definitely as you manage an organization that grows bigger and bigger, you as a manager, you find yourself spending more and more time figuring out what are the right goals that align my organization. How do I put those goals ahead in a way that's specific, measurable, that's achievable, but at the same time kind of inspiring and pushing us forward. So that focus on the outcomes and that focus on visibility in the team is the right substitute for surveillance and the right foundation that helps us stay productive even when we're working remote. So I want to talk about now about some best practices and kind of the blueprint of effective remote work. Before I dive there, a little bit more of a background on my own company. We have more than 1,000 employees, so I know what I'm talking about. And our offices, even before we switched to work from home environment in this pandemic world, we were fairly distributed because in California we have office in Silicon Valley and an office in San Diego. We also have office in Dallas. We have within the United States about 50 employees that are working remotely from different cities, metros, and states. We have office in Dublin, Ireland. We have office in Prague, in St. Petersburg, in Tokyo, in Melbourne. So we, even before we switched to, we were forced to switch to work remotely from our homes, we had to collaborate and coordinate efficiently across distance and time zones. So effective collaboration was always top of mind for me. And on top of that, our company develops work management software, the whole premise of which is helping teams achieve their best through better collaboration and visibility, right? So over the years, I spoke to thousands of customers. As of this date, we have about 20,000 customers, right? So kind of day in and day out, we breathe collaboration and what doesn't. So when we had to switch to this remote work environment, it happened overnight, just as with any other companies out there. But that transition for us at the same time was fairly seamless, and we very quickly found ourselves in the area where our productivity actually improved. So I wanted to talk about a couple of things that we've done and maybe offer some sort of advice that I've also heard from the customers and that we've learned from serving the industry. So we recently done a survey of about 10,000 respondents, and in the surveys we found that a lot of people are actually technologically and kind of from the perspective of infrastructure, hardware and software, and even the physical tables and chairs, they don't necessarily have the right workplace environment at home, physically and digitally, right? So that is probably kind of your first stop, and I'm sure many of you have thought about it. We know that as pandemic hit the companies, they're sort of immediately the usage of Teams and Slack and Zoom and VPN have skyrocketed. So that's probably kind of first thing that comes to mind. But I would encourage you to think deeper. So for example, if work from home is in here for your company to stay for quarters and potentially even beyond that, right? Then employees working at home, you should think about it in the same ways when they're working from the office, right? In the office, you want them to use large monitors because that makes them more productive and easier to operate with data, right? So think about, do they have the same setup at home? If in the office you provide noise canceling headphones, right? Think about whether they have the same luxury at home. So we found that a lot of employees are not enabled enough at home, and I think that's your first step. Then the next step that I would encourage you to think is visibility, right? So now we're no longer in the same room. We can't just whiteboard or kind of manage by passing by, right? We need to understand what's going on. There's no longer kind of a physical water cooler and shared lunches. So from that perspective, there needs to be a system of record for your work. Just like any company of size and scale would have system of record for customers, and that would be CRM. And these days, companies would typically also have some cloud storage for documents, so they don't just kind of spread across everybody's inbox. In the same realm, your projects, your tasks, your workflow shouldn't be just spread around tens of thousands of instant messages and emails, right? So you need to bring them together in system of record that is also kind of collaborative in real time. So your employees, your team lives and breathes in that system, and any time of the day and night, you can log in and see, okay, here's where things stand, right? So to point you in the right direction, when people think about that, they either implement some sort of boards, right, or project management software, or task management software, something that gives you visibility into that work, where you can align your process to what's happening. Again, it should be real time and collaborative. You don't want people to just shoot messages in and out in one system about work and then have some other system that's out of date, right? You want them to collaborate on work in the same environment where they plan it and where you track and monitor it. And that gives everybody transparency of where their teammates are, what's the progress, what are the goals, and people can row in the same direction. I would also encourage you to think about processes. So lately, if you watch software world, over the last decade, Agile took it over completely. And so any respectable software team right now deploys best practices from Agile processes, one shape or form or another. And when COVID environment hit us hard and we need to switch to work from home, I personally encouraged and supported every teams in our organization to redeploy Agile best practices. And I'm not just speaking engineering teams, right, which live and breathe Agile every day. I'm speaking about business operations team, marketing team, which was quite handy, because if you think about business operations, what's more Agile than having to redo your whole annual plan 3 months in with a completely different set of assumptions, and also not just completely different, but a set of assumptions that evolves every single week, right? If you remember those times, March, April, like every single week, every couple of weeks, your key assumptions, so you can throw them away and come up with completely new ones, right? So very environment that requires you to operate your business in a very Agile way, and so which makes it very natural for you to deploy Agile processes across your organization. And the benefit of them is that Agile teaches transparency and kind of puts heavy emphasis on transparency and teamwork, which surprisingly, quote unquote, works very well for this remote environment, right? So your team understands what's going on, the team has clear priorities, the team can break down the work in manageable chunks, and everybody knows how, as a team, we're progressing towards those goals. So that's one thing that we've done, and I've seen it work well, and I recommend to others. And we obviously deployed our own software, especially because it allows to implement Agile in a business user-friendly way, not just kind of their software development technical implementation, but something that's very friendly for marketers or operations teams. Then other thing which we've done is we re-implemented practice of quarterly objectives and key results. Now, there's nothing new in that. Most companies do quarterly planning, whether you call it MBOs or KRs. I don't think it makes a dramatic difference, but what makes a difference is, are they transparent, right? So can everybody in the company see them? And also, at which level are they done, and how connected is that whole system? So for me, the golden standard is when every manager in the company has her own set of OKRs that reflect OKRs of a larger group, right? So it's kind of it's not necessarily absolutely connected structure, because then it's indigestible. You would have like thousands and thousands of key results, so that's very hard to process. Every team should have about between 2 to 5 objectives, which each one of them having between 2 and 7 key results. But then it trickles down through an org chart where I set with the executive team objectives for the quarter for the whole company, right? And then each executive with their leadership group set objectives for their departments and so on and so forth, where it kind of feeds from each other, and that allows everybody in the company to row in the same direction and get that visibility into outcomes, if you will, right? So we all know what's expected from us. Those key results should absolutely be measurable, and there's no hiding. And I don't care how much time you personally spend with Facebook or Netflix on that week, right? It doesn't matter for me. What matters is, are you making progress to our goals? What matters for me is, are our goals aligned? Because in a large company, you can't just do anything by one department, right? You need support from a lot of people in an organization to make something happen. So we've re-implemented OKRs, and we continue to do so, and that was very helpful. And again, it helped that when we put it on our platform, we were able to connect it with Agile sprints and also with all the other, with our system of record for work that we're having. So those are the best practices which I found very helpful for our organization. I've seen them work across thousands of customers, and I hope they will be helpful for you as well.